In the pouring Chicago rain, a devoted dog trainer named Megan Thompson walks away from her job with nothing but a cardboard box and her loyal German Shepherd, Duke. Fired for saving a child's life, she thinks her world has ended. Then two Black Hawk helicopters descend from the storm, rotors roaring, soldiers shouting one impossible line. "We don't want the chief, we want the trainer and her dog." What happens next will change everything forever. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe. The rain fell steady on Chicago that October afternoon, a cold gray curtain over the streets, turning the sidewalks into mirrors of regret. Megan Thompson was 35, a woman who had carried too much for too long. She stood in the doorway of the fire station, cardboard box in her arms, the photo of her late husband pressed against her chest like a secret she could no longer share. Her shoulder-length brown hair clung wet to her face, her blue eyes tired but steady. She wore the navy polo of the department, the reflective windbreaker now heavy with water, and the black tactical boots that had walked through smoke and fear for years. 3 years since the accident took her husband, she had learned to live with silence, except for Duke. Duke, her German Shepherd, 6 years old now, walked at her heel. Black and tan coat darkened by rain, ears alert, he moved with the quiet certainty of a partner who never questioned her. He had been more than a dog. He had been her anchor, the one who lay beside her bed at night, breathing slow when her own breath caught. Tonight he pressed close, shoulder against her leg, as if to remind her the world had not ended. Earlier that day, the alarm had sounded for a high-rise blaze. Victor Lang, the chief, 53, tall and heavy in his white short-sleeve uniform, tie thin and red like a warning, had stood in the command post. His voice was low, measured, the voice of a man who had learned to weigh lives against paperwork. He hesitated over insurance clauses, over protocol, while smoke poured from the windows. Megan had not waited. She gave Duke the command. The dog plunged into the haze, nose low, leading her through the black corridors to the boy. Ethan, 8 years old, coughing in a corner. They brought him out alive. Victor's face had tightened. "Insubordination," he said, the word flat and final. The dismissal came fast, like a door slamming. Now she knelt on the wet pavement outside the station. The box slipped a little. The photo inside shifted. She wrapped her arms around Duke's neck, rain dripping from her forehead to his fur. "I'm sorry, boy," she whispered. "I don't know how we'll eat." Duke leaned in harder, his head against her chest, warm breath steady against the cold. In that moment, the city's noise faded, the sirens distant, the traffic a murmur, and there was only the sound of rain on asphalt and the soft thump of a loyal heart. She rose slowly, lifted the box again, and started walking. Duke stayed close, step for step. The rain kept falling, but somewhere beneath the weight of loss, a small quiet certainty remained. She was not entirely alone. The city lights blurred through the rain that evening, street lamps casting long, trembling reflections on the wet pavement, as if the whole world were trying to remember something it had lost. Megan walked slowly, the cardboard box growing heavier with every step. Water seeped into her boots, cold and persistent, matching the ache that had settled deep in her chest. She kept her eyes on the sidewalk, avoiding the faces of strangers who hurried past under umbrellas. 3 years of grief had taught her how to carry silence, but tonight the silence felt different, sharper, like the edge of a blade she could not see. Duke stayed close, his paws padding soft beside her, his warm breath visible in the chill air. She glanced down at him once, saw the steady rhythm of his gait, and felt a small, stubborn gratitude. At least one living thing still walked with her. The sound came first, a low thrum, growing louder, shaking the puddles at her feet. She stopped. People around her looked up, phones raised. Then the sky split open. 2 Black Hawk helicopters descended through the gray, rotors whipping the rain into a stinging mist. Cars swerved, people scattered. The lead bird touched down right in the intersection, skids kissing asphalt with precision. Doors slid open. Men in dark tactical gear jumped out, young, focused, faces hidden under helmets. One of them, broad-shouldered, voice cutting through the roar, shouted over the wind, "We don't want the chief! We want the trainer and her dog!" Megan froze. The words landed like stones in still water. Duke's ears lifted. He stepped forward half a pace, body tense but calm, as though he had been waiting for this moment all along. The soldier approached, rain streaming off his visor. He knelt slightly, eyes scanning Duke first, then Megan. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady despite the chaos, "the president's granddaughter, Sophie, 8 years old, is trapped under a collapse. Our teams can't reach her. The air's running out. We need you. We need him." He nodded at Duke. Megan's heart stuttered. She looked at the dog. His brown eyes met hers, clear, unwavering, the same eyes that had watched her cry through countless nights. In that gaze she saw no fear, only readiness. Something inside her shifted, quiet but certain. She had lost her job, her place, her certainty, but she had not lost this. They moved fast. The soldier helped her into the bird, Duke leaping up without hesitation. Before the doors closed, Duke sat straight, ears pricked, looking straight ahead, as if this were just another drill in the backyard at midnight. The soldier glanced at him, shook his head with something like wonder. "That dog knows the job better than most men do," he said softly. Megan settled beside Duke, her hand resting on the warm fur of his neck. The helicopter lifted, tilting into the storm. Below, the city shrank away, lights smearing into streaks. She felt the vibration in her bones, the pull of the unknown. Yet in the noise, in the rush, there was a stillness too. Duke leaned against her leg, steady as ever. And for the first time since the station doors closed behind her, Megan allowed herself to believe that perhaps the world had not finished with her yet. She closed her eyes for a moment. The rain tapped against the metal skin of the helicopter like a quiet promise. Somewhere ahead, a child waited. And somewhere inside her, a small old faith began to stir again. The helicopter blades thumped steady above the city lights, a deep rhythm like a heartbeat carried on the wind, while inside the cabin the air tasted of metal and rain. Megan sat on the cold bench, her hand still resting on Duke's neck. The vibration traveled through her fingers into his fur, and she felt him breathe, slow, even, unshaken. She spoke to him quietly, the same words she had used in the backyard on sleepless nights. "Ready, boy." Duke's ears flicked forward. His brown eyes held hers, steady as stone, carrying no doubt only trust. She had trained him for moments like this, but never imagined the weight they would carry tonight. The soldier beside her watched in silence, then said softly, "He's not afraid." Megan nodded. In that small exchange, she felt something loosen inside her, the knot of failure from the station, the fear that she had nothing left to give. Duke had never asked for titles or paychecks. He had only asked to be near her, and now here he was, ready again. They landed hard on the tarmac of the Air Force Reserve Base, the jolt running up her spine. Floodlights cut sharp through the dark, turning the rain into silver needles. A cluster of men in fatigue stood around a makeshift perimeter, faces tight with worry. The collapse site waited just beyond, a mountain of broken concrete and twisted steel, dust still rising like smoke from a dying fire. Sophie was somewhere beneath it all, her oxygen fading. The team leader, a colonel in his late 50s, gray hair cropped short under his cap, eyes shadowed by years of decisions that had cost lives, met them at the edge. His voice was rough, worn. "We can't get in without risking more collapse. The air pocket's small. If we wait." He didn't finish. Megan looked at Duke. The dog stood alert, nose already lifting, reading the wind. She knelt, cupped his head in both hands. "Find her, Duke? Just like we practiced." He pressed his forehead to hers for one brief second, warm, solid, then turned toward the rubble. Duke moved first. His black and tan coat blended with the shadows as he picked his way forward, nose low, tail still. The soldiers watched, breath held. He paused at a narrow fissure, ears pricked, then pushed his muzzle into the gap, sniffing deep. A low whine escaped him. Not fear, but certainty. He began to dig, pause, careful, deliberate, uncovering a sliver of space where the air still moved. Megan followed, crawling after him, her breath loud in her ears. Duke wedged his shoulder against a loose slab, muscles straining, and nudged it aside inch by inch. Then he backed out, eyes fixed on her. She reached in, felt the small, cold hand. Sophie Megan pulled gently, Duke leaning back with all his weight, helping drag the girl free. When Sophie lay on the ground, pale and still, Megan knelt, pressed her mouth to the child's, breathed life back in, once, twice. The girl's chest rose, her eyelids fluttered. Duke stepped close, lowered his head, and licked her cheek once, soft and slow, as if to say, "Welcome back." Sophie's small hand lifted, trembling, and touched his fur. "Thank you, brave dog," she whispered. Duke lay down beside her, letting her head rest against his side, his warmth a quiet promise. Around them, grown men wiped their eyes. The colonel looked away, throat working. Megan stayed on her knees, one hand on Sophie's hair, the other on Duke's back. The rain had stopped. A faint light broke through the clouds. In the stillness that followed, she felt it, not victory, not redemption, but something gentler. Forgiveness, perhaps, for the rules she had broken, for the years she had carried alone. Duke's steady breathing rose and fell beneath her palm, and she understood. The greatest rescues are not always the ones we plan. Sometimes they are the ones we never saw coming. The hangar lights burned bright against the fading storm, turning the wet tarmac into a sheet of silver, while the air carried the faint smell of jet fuel and relief. The president stepped out from the shadows of the perimeter. Daniel Whitaker, 58, tall and steady, silver hair catching the light, wore a simple white shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows, dark chinos, and the quiet authority of a man who had seen too many graves. His blue eyes held a weariness that years in office had carved deep, yet tonight they softened when they fell on Sophie. He knelt beside her, gathered her small body into his arms, and held her close for a long moment. Then he rose, looked at Megan, and spoke in a voice low and rough with feeling. "You saved my granddaughter, and this dog." He glanced at Duke, who sat beside the girl, tail still, eyes watchful. "He's more than a partner. He's family." Megan felt the words settle over her like warm rain. She had come here broken, carrying only the weight of loss. Now, under those lights, she felt seen, not as a fired trainer, but as someone who had given everything when no one else would. Word spread fast. Phones lit up across the city. The footage, Duke leading through the rubble, Megan breathing life back into Sophie, spread like fire through dry grass. The dog. And the trainer climbed the screens of the nation. People watched in living rooms, in diners, in quiet bedrooms, and felt something stir, the old belief that goodness still mattered. But at the fire station, Victor Lang moved quickly. He stood behind a podium in the atrium, white short-sleeve uniform, crisp, thin red tie straight, his face composed, but eyes darting. He spoke of instability, of reckless actions, words chosen to protect the walls he had built around his authority. The cameras rolled, the room listened. Megan, still damp from the rain, stood outside with Duke, watching the broadcast on a small screen. Each lie landed like a stone in her chest. She had lost her place once. Now they tried to take her name. The motorcade arrived without warning. Sirens cut the night. Secret Service cleared a path. The president walked straight into the atrium, Megan at his side, Duke heeling close. The room fell silent. Victor's voice faltered mid-sentence. Daniel stepped to the podium, calm, unhurried. He spoke of Sophie, of the girl who had almost slipped away, of the woman who had refused to let her. Then he turned to Victor. "You fired her for saving a child, for following her heart when your rules stood in the way." Victor opened his mouth, words stumbling. Duke, standing tall beside Megan, suddenly lifted his head and barked, once sharp, deep, straight at the chief. The sound echoed off the walls. Victor flinched, stepped back. The president gave a small, tired smile. Even the dog knows the truth. The room exhaled. Victor's shoulders dropped. The board's decision came over the phone, quick and final. Suspension, effective now. He took the empty box they handed him, walked out under the flash of cameras, head low. Megan stood there, Duke's shoulder warm against her leg. The noise of the crowd rose. Cheers, soft and growing. She looked down at the dog. His eyes met hers, calm, certain. In that moment she understood. Justice was not always loud. Sometimes it arrived in a bark, in a quiet truth spoken when no one else would. The weight she had carried for so long felt lighter now. Not gone, but shared. And in the stillness that followed, she felt a promise take root. She would keep going. For Duke. For the children yet to come. For the small, stubborn belief that right still had a place in the world. The Chicago skyline stood soft in the late summer light 1 year later, the river reflecting gold, carrying the city's steady hum like an old friend who never forgets. Megan walked the halls of what had once been the fire station, now renamed the Megan Thompson Center for Rescue Training. The sign above the door was simple wood, letters carved deep, catching the afternoon sun. She was 36 now, the lines around her eyes a little deeper, but her step lighter. She wore a navy polo again, this one embroidered with the new name in gold thread, and the same black tactical boots that had carried her through smoke and rain. The weight of the past had not vanished, but it had settled into something bearable. She had become director, not by ambition, but by the quiet insistence of those who had watched her refuse to let a child die. The culture had shifted. Protocols still existed, but hearts came first. Dogs were no longer tools. They were partners. And Victor Lang? The courts had spoken. 5 years for insurance fraud. He had built his world on paper. It crumbled when the truth finally breathed. In the training yard behind the center, Megan knelt beside a young shepherd pup, guiding its nose to a hidden scent. Duke watched from the shade, 6 going on 7, his black and tan coat still glossy, his gaze steady as ever. He no longer ran the courses, but he taught by presence, calm, certain, the way old dogs do. Every evening he climbed the stairs to her small house, paws soft on the wood floor, and settled beside her bed. His breathing filled the quiet room, a rhythm she had come to need like air. She would reach down, fingers in his fur, and remember the night the helicopters came, the night she thought everything had ended. Duke had never asked for thanks. He had only stayed. And in that staying, he had given her back her life. The dedication ceremony was small, held under a white tent in the courtyard. Chairs filled with firefighters, trainers, families who had once lost someone and now believed again. Megan stood at the podium, voice low but clear. "I thought I had lost everything that day," she said, "but Duke taught me family isn't blood. It's who stands with you when the world turns away. And sometimes a hero doesn't need a title, just a heart and a nose that never lies." The crowd was quiet. A few wiped their eyes. Duke sat at her feet, head tilted, listening as though he understood every word. When she stepped down, he rose to meet her, pressing his shoulder against her leg. The sun dipped lower, painting the yard warm. She looked out over the faces, people who had known loss, who had carried it alone, and felt the old ache soften into something gentler. Later that same day, the alarm sounded again. A car wreck on the interstate, a child trapped. Megan and Duke went together, not as strangers to the work, but as those who had walked through fire and come out the other side. Duke moved with the same quiet certainty, nose low, leading her to the twisted metal. They worked in silence, the kind that comes after years of trust. The boy was freed. His mother wept, holding her child close. Megan watched, hand on Duke's head, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. In that moment she knew. The story wasn't over. It never would be. Not as long as there were hearts willing to risk and dogs willing to stay. Duke looked up at her, eyes calm. And she smiled, the small, real smile of someone who had found her place again. She walked home that evening with him at her side, the city lights coming on one by one. The past was still there, soft now, like an old scar. But ahead lay something better, a promise kept day after day in the quiet company of a faithful friend. As the years pass, many of us face the quiet ache of loneliness, the slow shadow of illness, and the empty chairs where loved ones once sat. If you're over 65 and feel that weight today, know this: you are never truly alone. A faithful friend, be it a dog, a memory, or a kind soul, can still light the way. Take heart, stay strong, and reach out. Share this story in the comments, like, subscribe, and may God bless and heal every heart watching. You matter.